Shalom everyone, and welcome to the continuation of the Rebuke of Malkah Norwood. What you're about to hear is a short testimony from a family who has been with MNM Ministry for a short time. And they will be talking about everything that they saw and heard from Malkah and the wickedness and hypocrisy she is walking in. Please listen very carefully to everything that is being said. Thank you, and shalom.
Good day, everyone. My wife and I are here to give our testimony to the things we witnessed with Malkah in the assembly of July of 2025 to September of 2025, our short time in the ministry.
Being a family of 6 just coming out of America, we were pretty happy to be welcome here at Meat No Milk Ministry. We never met Malkah in the flesh, but we were having Shabbats on Zoom together because we were in different countries at the time over here. At first, everything seemed pretty normal when we started having Shabbat with everyone. We had those that we were in the flesh with, and of course, Malkah, like I said, was in another country, so, we were on Zoom. Yes, but with like the different families and stuff, we'd have situation that will come up, of course, when you have a group of people, there will be times where there's finance situation or just situation in the family dynamic as a whole. And what I witnessed with Malkah was definitely very, very soon after arriving was a lack of compassion. Whereas, say a family will come up, what I witnessed, and they would have need of something, and her response would be well, figure it out, or did you ask somebody? And, the demeanor and the way she said that was definitely a red flag for us. It even had us taken aback, and it was more than once. So therefore, we were even contemplating if this was the right setting for us.
After my wife and I witnessed the lack of compassion and the conversation we had in our house, it made me start to pay attention more. And the more I pay attention, the more I realize that her posture, her behavior, the way she sits, the way she behaved wasn't correct in our eyes. Anyone that prays the true Elohim shouldn't have a demeanor that is so aggressive to the rest of the people looking at her to make her even afraid to ask or approach her in any way, because she will hurry you up. She will sit like a man with her leg wide open and her 2 hands on her legs and what? And we nah, something ain't right with this woman. Something ain't sitting right. No one that prays a true El supposed to have this demeanor, understanding what is the fruits of the spirit, patience, care, love, understanding. And if you are truly praising him, especially the time that Malkah was praising him, she's supposed to have some kind of fruit of the spirit, and it was not showing her in her ways, in her acts, in her speech, in any way.
Like my husband said, we just, we're new, so we're just, checking things out. We, reserve any judgment, and before we make any rash decisions, we're just basically observing, and also, trying to interact with those that we were in person with at that time. And as time goes on, got a little worse, because it's okay, you seem this control, but yet, aspect of her as well, where, you start making all these rules that, you can't have your devices or your cell phones, or even to take notes when we will be going through scripture and doing teachings with each other, and exalting herself, when I was here sitting with, Sister Talia, that, I never had any note taking, and, basically exalting herself, how intellectual she is, she has a vast vocabulary, and, also, just putting herself, in a high standard state, I should say, the teachings is of hers, which is not. I mean, the teachings is of Talia. It's already there for everyone to have it, so that also I witness is okay, you're acting like you're giving such higher knowledge that came from you. No, it was already there.
This also is an example of not having the fruit of the spirit, even though she might portray herself that way.
And also to later find out that that wasn't even the case, even when, Malkah arrived here, she took notes, and so she looked down folks like, okay, well, you're taking notes. All I did was listen, and I retained all this knowledge from Talia. And the manner of how she spoke and what I got out of it was like she was holding this, like, yes, me and Talia is close. She would tell me all these Bible prophecies, and I have all this knowledge. So it's like, like she's basically like, be submissive to me, or else you wouldn't like know all these deep mysteries. And on top of that, it's like she was starting to come up with her own interpretation of how to keep Shabbat, like her own doctrines, like started to like, okay, you can't like use a knife on Shabbat. You can't cut a fruit. That's like you using a tool. Like these like crazy things at the time was like, okay, a knife, a fork, these are utensils. What do you mean you can't use these things? And go on to be like, okay, like even like to put a comb through your hair is like considered a tool, or using a clippers to clip your beard or something. I'm like, okay, this is getting a little like extreme and it don't even align with Torah. Like, you're giving your own interpretation and again, just like the control of the situation.
This is why you have to read the word and understand Torah for yourself, so no one can add or take away from your word without you understanding and make basic essential a tool, making the Shabbat a burden.
Hello everybody, this will be the oldest child of the family, and I just wanted to give my witness also towards the hypocrisy, because as you heard from my mom when she was talking about the creating different doctrines, there was a time where a member of the ministry was confessing and thinking that they had broken Shabbat due to her creating different doctrines about tools, and she admitted that she also broke Shabbat through deciding to finish cooked biscuits in the oven, making that conscious decision to break Shabbat, when she would always talk to us about the importance of Shabbat and making sure we hold Shabbat and reverence it and hold it to a high standard. And to see her kind of like say that they broke Shabbat in such a way that it didn't matter, like, oh yeah, we broke Shabbat, we know we broke Shabbat by finishing cooking the biscuits, but she said it in a way that it did not matter, which kind of makes it seem like she held herself above the law.
Yes, and like my daughter said, like brushing it off, like, like Shabbat isn't like important. Shabbat is important. If you don't get Shabbat right, it's like you might as well just don't even walk this walk. Like, it is very important. It's a commandment. And to see that these individuals was, sincerely heartbroken for breaking Shabbat, and to just brush it off like it's nothing, it was very, disheartening to see that. And on top of that, with the hypocrisy, is like, okay, you talk about how folks would come on feast days, bringing accusations, and you talk about how one of the sisters, brought accusation against you on this feast day, and that we're supposed to take care of our, removing any leavening in our heart or any malice or anything we may have against our brethren before we come to the feast day. And here it is, we have a holy feast day, and this is when Malkah now wants to come and bring an accusation on, Talia and also the whole ministry, saying how she's oppressed and she's demanding wages while she's going to the authorities. We also witnessed that, and I was like, it was confusing, because here it is, you call Talia your sister, you call this your calling, and this is what, you're here to help, and, you're supposed to be leadership. Here telling your sister, like basically you need to do more, because on top of paying all your bills, paying for your daughter's school, like what more do you need? This is your sister. This is your spiritual leader who took you in when, you was down, you were homeless. And here it is, you have an opportunity to take care of your sister and, return that favor. And here it is, you want money, you want something in writing. It's almost like, you're like demanding, like, if you don't pay me, I'm gonna tell the authorities like you're oppressing me and holding me here against your will. Hello. You can leave at any time. That was so wrong, and it was very disheartening. And I was one of the sisters here, pleading, like, what do you need, Malkah? What of your needs that is not being met? And you could not even say what it is you wanted. You understand? You just kept making accusation against others that you just abandon you here. This is not what you signed up for. What do you mean signed up for? Are we not supposed to be service to one another? Are we not here as family?
My family and I felt compelled to give our testimony because seeing that Malkah is a public figure and she has so much influence on many, we didn't want her to lead many people astray simply by saying things like she have the Holy Spirit, which clearly you can see through her testimony. She do not bear any fruit of the Spirit.
Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for part 2.2, where we continue our rebuke on Malkah Norwood. Please watch the following videos if you have not already on the affiliated channels of Meet No Milk Ministries to hear further explanation, witnesses, and rebukes about Malkah Norwood. Also, please follow all the affiliated channels of Meet No Milk Ministry, starting first with leader, teacher Sibaya at Talia Levy 1. Next, Meet No Milk Hebrew. Next, Jacob's Trouble Hotline. And last but not least, Righteous Reactions 1.